Testing 1, 2. Okay, got it. Great. Yeah. So thanks, Reza. So yeah, as Reza mentioned, I'm a designer here at Mozilla. I used to work a lot on Firefox OS, so doing like typical designery things, doing wireframes. I used to work on a lot of apps and the system for Firefox OS. But then about 6 months ago, we took the pivot into looking at IoT, and because of that, I didn't really have anything to design anymore. It was more about discovering what are the design opportunities. So my kind of role shifted a bit to becoming more of a product researcher. And you know, as a designer, I've done some things like usability testing. Like when you have a product, you speak to customers about it. But I was faced with this new problem of like, well, what do you do? What kind of research do you do with people when you don't really have a product yet, and you're looking for opportunities? So that's kind of what led me to this jobs to be done framework, which I'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, getting into it, you know, I knew there was this, this very famous quote from Henry Ford, which is, you know, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And so I think, you know, the problem I had to get around was, well, what kind of questions do you ask people when you're doing this kind of consumer research? And I think for me, jobs to be done, the whole framework is really kind of addressing this problem kind of head on, because it's really trying to think of it in a different way. If you've done some like research into jobs to be done, you'll probably heard of this milkshake example, which is like the one Clay Christensen uses a lot to introduce the methodology. So Clay Christensen, as you might know, he's the author of The Innovator's Dilemma. There's a lot of talk on product discovery and kind of innovation thinking. And he was talking about this time when he basically was hired to help one of the big kind of fast food chains sell more milkshakes. And they'd already kind of come in, done some research. You know, they did the classic thing, like what Henry Ford was saying. They identified, you know, what the classic milkshake kind of segment customer is like. Gave them some samples, asked them what they would like, and this had absolutely no impact on sales whatsoever. So he kind of took a different approach, and that starts off by observing customers. So they basically spent, you know, the whole day in the outlet, looking at, you know, when do people buy these things, and they noticed that over 50% of milkshakes are purchased early in the morning. They're done by people who come in alone. And it's the only thing that they buy. And then the next day, you know, they would come back and then ask in like not so many words, you know, they would confront these people and say, well, why did you buy the milkshake, or what was the job that it was doing for you? And the basic philosophy behind jobs to be done is that people hire products to do some job for them in their lives. It's both like a thing, a job. You can think of a job as a thing, but it's also like a philosophy. It's basically, yeah, it's the philosophy that people are hiring products to solve problems. But also it's like the only real research that's of any value when talking to consumers is around these jobs. And so you try and delve into like what are the jobs that people are hiring these products to do. So that's basically what they asked these people, and they found out that basically people were buying these milkshakes not for food or nutrition necessarily, but it was basically to make their commute less boring. And they'd be buying them like on their way to work. Maybe they'd skip breakfast. They're in a bit of a hurry. They wanted something that would just be there in the cup holder, which, you know, they could keep hunger at bay, but it was kind of also served other functions like you know, basically to make the long kind of boring drive a bit more interesting. And it was, you know, it's the perfect thing to solve that particular problem. You know, the milkshake fits in the cup holder. It'll last 20 minutes. You know, if you take a banana, it's gone in 30 seconds. So it's basically the perfect thing for that particular situation. And so that was the key insight that they found out through the research, which then helped them kind of move forward, not just with the design of the milkshakes. I mean, I think they made the milkshakes thicker so they would last longer, and they would have little bits in them so that, you know, be a bit more entertaining when you're in your 20-minute drive, feel like a lump of strawberry. But also, you know, changed the way that they sold it and marketed it as well. So in my own research, I was looking very much at the Amazon Echo as an example of what to try and delve into, what are the jobs people are solving with that, or what are they hiring the Echo to do. But first of all, I needed to think about, what are jobs? And I think this is where there's a lot of discussion about jobs to be done methodology out there, but it's really hard sometimes to nail down what is a job. And there's some talk about their goals. They solve some kind of high-level purpose. They're a mental model. I think all of them, there's one thing in common with all of these definitions is that it's about some change that you want to make in your life. And so I like to think of jobs as a struggle, because with every change that you want to make, there's always like some kind of pressure or kind of force moving you back as well. People want to change, but at the same time, they don't like change. And so the struggle is what kind of characterizes a job for me. And there's a course on Udemy which kind of tells you a little bit about doing jobs to be done interviews. They reference this very interesting diagram, which I kind of used basically in my research to kind of really delve into what are the aspects of the job. And like I said, there are like some forces pushing people forward to make a change. There's the push of the situation. So what is it about your current life that makes you want to kind of make a change in your life? There's the pull of the solution itself. So when you're interacting and finding out about a product, you'll find things which will then kind of increase that force for change. But then there's always like forces holding you back. There's always anxiety around making a change. And then there's your daily habits as well about your present, which you don't really want to break. So breaking those habits is always hard for people. So this kind of informed a lot of the questions that I would ask. And uncovering the jobs, I think, yeah, the basic difference, I think, when you're doing this kind of research is that instead of saying, what would you like, like the Henry Ford problem here, if you ask people what they want, you don't really get good answers. Instead of asking questions like that, it's really about asking indirect questions and basically getting people to tell the story of their lives in terms of what led up to the change. You always try and find like some kind of switching situation in people's lives, and then you get them to tell the story of what led up to this change. And so another key tool for doing this kind of research is this idea of the timeline. And you're focusing a lot on that process, that decision-making process that led people to make a change. And like through various points in this timeline, you can identify like some of those different forces that I was telling you about. So early on, you talk about what people's routines are, what their habits are, and then when the very first thought of like making a change, that tells you a lot about the push of the situation. And as they get closer to like buying or making a switch, then you'll see like them interacting with like the idea of like what this product could do for them. So that tells you about the pull. And then as they get almost to the point of buying, then the anxieties of making that change start to come out. So that's kind of like, you try and get people to tell the story of that journey to kind of really tease apart these different forces. So getting on to the results. So basically, I spoke to a lot of people who bought like an Echo in the last about 3 to 6 months. So it was kind of new enough for them to still remember what happened before. And I think one of the interesting things was that some of the things you might think people are buying an Echo for don't really come out when you actually speak to people. Like the idea that it's a Bluetooth speaker isn't really important for people because in a lot of cases they already had Bluetooth speakers. The idea that you're accessing music, services, news and weather, again, not really an important factor for people. The key thing I think is the idea that you can see in the blurb there, it says it's always ready, connected, and fast. And so the kind of job that it's solving for people is this idea of like capturing thoughts, playing music, and answering questions as they come into your head. And I'll have a few audio clips to illustrate some of these points, which I'll go through. So how were you kind of handling those things before? So yeah, basically here I was asking one of the research participants, what was the problem with your situation? So looking at that push.
I would have to stop whatever I was doing and either grab my phone or turn on the TV and Google or,
Right.
look something up.
Right. And what was unappealing about that? Or
Oh, I mean, like, let's say I'm getting dressed for work and I want to know the weather. Now I have to dig for the remote control. Who knows where I left it? Or I have to grab my phone and, go into whatever web page that I use for the weather. Or I mean, it's just,
yeah,
it's not as convenient
yeah,
as just being able to ask, what's the weather today?
yeah,
It's like easy access with,
right,
with the Echo when it comes to things like that.
right,
So yeah, I think that kind of revealed like one of the more obvious jobs, I think, for why people are buying the Echo. Again, it's that idea of like doing it while your hands are full and you're busy with other stuff. That was one of the key things that that was attracting people. But I think another thing that really came out really strongly was this idea of impressing people. I think this was like the universal job that was being sold. Like everyone I spoke to, this kind of came out in some form. And again, it's not something that people would readily talk about. Like if you ask them a direct question, like why did you buy it, they wouldn't say to impress people. But then if you get people to tell the story, then those kinds of motivations do start to come out. Like for instance, in this
like when it came up to like the time when you pulled the trigger, was there anything that kind of made you think, okay, now I'm gonna go ahead?
I had to save for it a little bit.
Right.
The summer came too, so we were doing a lot of house parties. Well, not like house parties, like get-togethers, and
Right.
it's like a cool show-off piece. I'm not like a show-offy person, but if it's in like the front room, which is usually not, but I'll move it around. They'll see it and be like, "What's that?" And then I can educate them because, like I said, not a lot of people have these yet.
So I'm not sure if you heard that very clearly, but she was talking about how summer was coming. She could imagine these little get-togethers she was hosting, and so the idea of it being in the front room was like an important thing for like why that was like really what made her pull the trigger on the purchase. There are some other things that kind of came out which weren't necessarily being satisfied, but again, these were in people's minds up to the point of purchase. And one thing that came out was people did think they could get the Echo to like really make their lives easier and be more like a real personal assistant. So you could ask it to help you with fairly more complex tasks, like telling me about things I can do with my kids, or book me movie tickets, find me the best deal on this. I think in a lot of cases, people were actually found out that they couldn't do this. So this was like one of the points of dissatisfaction. But this definitely wasn't one of the things that people imagined in their minds before they actually bought the Echo itself. And here's another clip.
No, I just thought it would, help make things run smoother.
Right.
At home, make my shopping or my decisions a little easier.
Yeah.
Take some of the load off.
Yeah.
Some of my everyday things.
What kind of load are you talking about here?
Well, I mean, there's some things that I wish that the Echo could do that it doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't completely take the load off me.
Right.
I wish it could do a little bit more research. Like, for example, if I need to purchase movie tickets, I wish it could do it for me.
Yeah, and lots of other examples like that also came up. One other thing that kind of came out as well, I think, was this feeling that people are currently like overloaded on their devices. That their phones are like doing too much for them, and they want like some relief from using the phone all the time at home. And here's another clip to share that.
Yes, it's kind of, it becomes a process in terms of, right now, I would still say the phone, our smartphone is the fulcrum of our interactions with services, communications as such.
Right.
So maybe the Alexa has taken maybe 5-7% of that interaction away. So as more, it's a question of if Alexa becomes more prominent, then yes, your expectations start to build up that, hey, I wish you could do this now. I wish you could do this now.
Right.
But right now, she's still got a smaller percentage of your mind share, voice share, activity share, whatever you would call it.
Yeah, so I think for this one, I think this is like a job that also becomes more and more apparent as people use the Echo. Like they think initially in terms of it being able to take some tasks off the phone, but then as they use it more, it's something that really grows, and they basically think, anything I do on my phone now, it'd be nice if I could also do it on the Echo as well. And finally, I think there are a few more jobs, but I'll finish with this one. I think there's also as well as some of the functional jobs, there are also some more emotional ones, and this kind of comes out where when you hear people talking about the Echo, they really do talk about it like it's a person. Not all the time, but in a lot of cases, like people say, I hear Alexa's voice every day. I don't even hear my mother's voice every day. And if I didn't have the Echo anymore, then I'd miss that. I'd miss hearing her every day. It's become part of the family. People talk about how before she came into my life, and I want to find out her comfort zone and stuff like that. So I think this is people talk about her as if she's a person, but also it's also, I think, one of the motivations that kind of bring that people actually buy it for. They like the jokes, they like the personality. It almost becomes like a companion. And again, that's not always satisfied in every case, and I think these clips will show here.
I don't really feel like it has a personality in that way.
Right.
Even Siri has more of a snarky personality when you get that. It kind of seems more like it's just a voice that's activated rather than any kind of substance.
So yeah, she was saying there, that she was expecting it to have more substance, more personality, and she didn't really find that. And when I kind of delved into that a little bit, and tried to get her to tell stories again, this little snip came up.
Yeah, in the video for it, this family is leaving their house and they're like, "Bye, Alexa," and she's like, "Bye, have a great day, fam." She knows their names. It seems much more interactive. And when I first got it, I was having my godchildren say "Bye, Alexa," and every time they'd say bye, it wouldn't do anything. And then finally it would be "Goodbye." It was just really disappointing because I was hyping it up, watch, she's gonna know you guys, and it just didn't feel that way.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's one example of the advertising around the Echo set up these expectations that it'd be this person that's in your house, and so it kind of motivated people to buy it, but then people then subsequently found that actually it's fairly limited in terms of its personality, but it's definitely something that they want more of as they go through. I'll wrap it up there since I think I've been running for a while. Any questions? Hi.
So one of the cases was recently, well, not so recently in the media, was where an autistic child was interacting with Siri for a while as his companion, and that took quite a bit of load off from the family. And he was actually having a lot of success getting the information that would be otherwise very difficult.
Yeah.
Where do you see that's going to go with the evolution of Alexa and similar devices?
Well, I think that's also something that came up a lot in the research. It's not something that people necessarily thought of before they bought it, but I think one thing that anyone who had kids basically said, this is great. It really keeps my kids, entertained, and my kids really love it. They take to it. So, they were then thinking in terms of, well, wouldn't it be great if they could teach my kids some stuff, or teach them languages, teach them maths. And so I think a lot of people, that's one of the things they discover. It's not like a job they had previously in mind, but the kids take to it so well, then they start to imagine, these use cases with taking care of kids, educating them. Another guy I spoke to had a sick mother, and also found that it was really good giving her some independence, and that was a very specific job he had in mind. So I think, yeah, a lot of I think there are clear opportunities, like with having use cases around children, kind of elderly people. These definitely come to mind when you in the research.
Wale, did you have a question? Yeah. Hi. I was wondering how you thought there might be some solutions in terms of connecting on that emotional level with what's essentially a machine. Do you see any models from popular culture, from science fiction, what have you, like, or is there any research that's been especially fruitful in terms of like what you've seen?
Not much in my own research. I mean, I think with the people I spoke to, the kind of opinions were kind of divided. Like there were some people who said, don't pretend to be my friend. You're just a machine, and dial down the personality. With other people, it was like very much the opposite. It was like, yeah, I dig this. I like it, and amp it up. So I think I saw just through speaking with people, it was kind of like something that split opinions. I'm not really sure how it will go. I mean, I think it's one of these areas where it's very difficult to get right, and if you don't get it fully right, then it becomes kind of weird. So I think there's probably a temptation to make it more like a companion, but I think that would be a very tough problem to solve, I would imagine.
Right, like there are aspects of just like interpersonal psychology and things like that.
Yeah, and I think probably I'm guessing Amazon's tried to stay away from that, and they limit it to things like telling jokes, like giving stock snarky answers to like certain questions. So I think they're kind of playing it safe, so that they don't come across as being weird. But it definitely was a need that came up through the research. Yeah.
Cool.
But I think it'd be a hard one to solve.
Oh, sorry. Any other questions? Okay, we've got somebody over here. Here you are.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I figured this is fun. Nice microphone box. Thanks for the presentation. I was curious if you could elaborate a bit more on your goals going in, sort of what the point of this whole endeavor was, and also what you did with all the findings, any next steps that you took.
Yeah, so the goal I think was both like just general exploration of the space, but also really to like identify design opportunities. So I think when you look at the different jobs that come up, that gives you like ideas for like constraints and directions. Like how could you take the load off the phone more? How could you be more like a real personal assistant? You could then start thinking in terms of like how do I make conversation better. So I think it does point to like a number of areas that you could improve on, which was the general kind of goal. Yeah, in terms of like how we've taken it further, it's still kind of more at a ideation phase. Haven't really got to the point where we've got like a developed product yet.
Any other questions for Francis?
Yeah, this isn't specifically about sort of like connected devices specifically, but when you talked a lot about sort of the strategies that you would use to apply to things like the Echo, and you mentioned that wasn't really something that you were necessarily familiar with beforehand, or at least that's something that I got. You mentioned you were doing things like wireframes, which is a very sort of applied task. I guess personally, is that something that you sort of like saw yourself sort of going into it first, or did you just sort of decide at one point that this is kind of interesting, or I guess how did you decide to move to this sort of more like upper level, I guess not upper level, but I guess higher level abstraction, and then I guess is that difficult, and then why did you do it?
Well, I have a background in psychology, so like personally, it was like interesting to me. I think one of the reasons I kind of centered on this approach is that it does talk very much in terms of like people's motivations and anxieties, and so it's like I think it does tap in to like these very psychological processes in terms of understanding and characterizing people. So that was like something that was personally interesting to me, and I think another reason was just it was more pragmatic in that like I said we didn't really have anything to design anymore, so doing the switch to research was something where I felt I could be kind of valuable, but also something, personally, I'm motivated to make that switch. I think it's more fulfilling for me, more interesting. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Francis.
Thank you.